How you guys doing today? Jason A. Kuhn here, giving you a Fight the Deception with Christian Perception News Brief for May 16th, 2014. All articles discussed will be linked into the YouTube description box. We have a lot of news today with little time, so we'll jump into it here at RT.com. U.S. says it will increase aid to Syrian rebels, aka al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that the U.S. and its allies will expand their support to the Syrian opposition. Kerry's comments come after a U.S. general said the Syrian rebels do not have the means to defeat President Assad. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who was meeting British Foreign Minister William Hague in London, said that the U.S. and its allies had agreed to increase their support to the Syrian opposition, but did not specify if he meant arming them, which has came out in mainstream news for years. They have been arming them. Kerry said he was open to increasing aid to Syria, but said that no decision has been made on changing the general U.S. aid strategy to Syria. Syrian rebels have no force capable of holding government to administer aid and wage attacks against the current Assad regime. General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, told the Atlantic Council, a think tank and field of international affairs in Washington, D.C. We'll move on here to Breitbart.com. Department of Agriculture orders ballistic body armor. Wow, yesterday I read an article that the USDA is getting submachine guns. A May 7th solicitation by the U.S. Department of Agriculture seeks the commercial acquisition of ballistic vests compliant with NIJ 0101.06 for Level 3A ballistic resistance of body armor. According to the solicitation, quote, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Office of Inspector General seeks body armor that is gender-specific, lightweight, having trauma plate pads, hard or soft, and concealable carry. The order includes tactical vest undergarments, identification patches, accessories, body armor carry bag, and a professional measurements. Quote, all responsible or interested sources may submit their company name, point of contact, and telephone number. The solicitation says those sources received in a timely manner, quote, shall be considered by the agency for contact. On May 15th, Breitbart News reported on a Department of Agriculture solicitation for, quote, the commercial acquisition of submachine guns, unquote, with 30-round magazines. Wow, what are they preparing for? Let's move on here to Washington'sBlog.com. 90% of all deaths in war are civilians. The June 2014 issue of the American Journal of Public Health notes around 90% of all deaths in war are civilians. Quote, the proportion of civilian deaths and the methods of classifying deaths as civilians are debated, but civilian war deaths constitute 85% to 90% of casualties caused by war, with about 10 civilians dying for every combatant killed in battle, unquote. Swanson also notes, quote, a top defense of war is that it must be used to prevent something worse, called genocide. Not only does militarization generate genocide rather than preventing it, but the distinction between war and genocide is a very fine one at best, unquote. The U.S. launched 201 out of 248 armed conflicts since the end of World War II. Quote, since the end of World War II, there have been 248 armed conflicts in 153 locations around the world. The United States launched 201 overseas military operations between the end of World War II and 2001, and since then, others including Afghanistan and Iraq. U.S. military spending dwarfs all other countries. Quote, the United States is responsible for 41% of the world's total military spending. The next largest spending is China at 8.2%, Russia 4.1%, and the United Kingdom and France both are 3.6%. Now we're at 41% of the world's spending compared to China 8.2%, Russia 4.1%. Wow. If all military costs are included, annual U.S. spending amounts to $1 trillion. According to the DoD fiscal year 2012 base structure report, quote, the DoD manages global property of more than 555,000 facilities at more than 5,000 sites covering more than 28 million acres. Wow. The United States maintains 700 to 1,000 military bases or sites in more than 100 countries. Wow, let that sink in. We'll move on here to Infowars.com. Police now armed for war against returning veterans. In an interview with Fox 59, a Morgan County, Indiana police sergeant admits that the increasing militarization of domestic police departments is partly to deal with returning veterans who are now seen as a homegrown terror threat. As I mentioned before, after 9/11 and the Patriot Act was signed, we Americans are now the terrorists, especially the Christian-believing Americans. In a chilling story entitled Armed for War, Pentagon Surplus Gives Local Police an Edge, we learn how a mine-resistant vehicle, which was once used during the occupation of Afghanistan, will now be, quote, patrolling the streets of central Indiana, unquote, according to the report. Sergeant Dan Downing of the Morgan County Sheriff's Department states, quote, when I first started, we really didn't have the violence that we see today, unquote, adding, quote, the weaponry is totally different now than it was in the beginning of my career. Plus, you have a lot of people who are coming out of the military that have the ability and the knowledge to build IEDs and to defeat law enforcement techniques, unquote. Downing goes on to relate how citizens approach the vehicle when it stops at gas stations to express their concerns that the militarization of police is about arming cops with the tools required for mass gun confiscation programs. Quote, we were actually approached when we'd stop to get fuel by people wanting to know why we needed this. What were we going to use it for? Quote, are you coming to take our guns away, unquote, said Downing. Quote, to come and take away their firearms, that's absolutely is not the reason why we go this vehicle. We got this vehicle because of the need and because of increased violence that we have been facing over the last few years. I'll be the last person to come and take anybody's guns, unquote. Now he mentions the increased violence that they've been facing over the last few years. Name one instance in America where a returning vet has made a bomb or threatened to blow up a building or a roadside bomb IED. There is none. Let's move on to wearechange.org. President Obama receives Ambassador for Humanity Award. No, this is not satire. Here's a quote by Voltaire, quote, it is forbidden to kill, therefore all murderers are punished, unless they kill in large numbers and to sound of the trumpets. Unquote. It is impossible not to gain the impression that the criteria for being awarded prestigious honors for services to, quote, peace, humanity, or distinguished public service, unquote, is a candidate who duplicitous, vicious, stone-hearted, and above all prepared to kill, plan killings, or rejoice in killing on an industrial scale as brutality can be devised, or as brutally as can be devised. Moments after being informed of the horrific death of Libyan leader Colonel Muammar Gaddafi in October 2011, then Secretary of State Clinton said, quote, wow, then unforgettably and chillingly laughed, telling a television crew, quote, we came, we saw, he died, unquote. Asked if her recent visit to Libya had anything to do with his death, she, quote, rolled her eyes and said, quote, I'm sure it did, unquote. 6 months later, in April 2012, Clinton received the Woodrow Wilson Award for Public Service. The following month, she received the Champions for Change Award for Leadership, and in May in 2013, the inaugural Warren Christopher Public Services Award. Madeleine Albright's comment when U.S. Ambassador to the UN on 60 Minutes, 12th of May 1996, that the price of the lives of 500,000 children who had died as a result of the U.S.-driven UN sanctions on Iraq was, quote, a hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it, unquote, was no bar to her receiving under 2 years later the 1998 International Rescue Committee's Freedom Award, quote, for extraordinary contributions to the cause of human freedom. The list of those who have received the Freedom Award reveals the remarkable ability of an individuals to shape history and change for the better, a world moving toward freedom for all. The freedom of the grave comes to mind. This also reminds me of the Time Magazine Man of the Year Award, who was once given to none other than Hitler and Stalin. Other recipients have been John McCain, 2001, George H.W. Bush, whose regime vowed to, quote, reduce Iraq to a pre-industrial age, unquote, and he did in 1991, and Bill Clinton, whose presidency, in addition to several massive bombings and unending daily ones, oversaw, manipulated, and pressured the UN to continue to implement the most draconian embargo in the organization's history and ensure that children, the sick, went on dying in ever greater numbers every year of his presidency. They were both honored in 2005. We'll go back to Infowars.com for the last article of the day. Florida County rejects spending $800,000 to fluoridate water supply. About 60,000 households in Hernando County, Florida were debating on spending $800,000 in taxpayer money to poison themselves with fluoride a few months ago. According to Susan Goebel Canning, the county's director of environmental services, this is what it would cost to put the leftovers from phosphate fertilizer and semiconductor industries into everyone's water. Thankfully, they decided against fluoridating the water supplies. It boils down to spending $30,000 per treatment plant and multiplying that by 27, the number of plants the county would need to treat all its water. People on a well system would be unaffected, but 60,000 people in the county would be drinking fluoridated water, which has been proven to be toxic and extremely harmful to human health. Even the American Medical Association once told the truth about fluoride, quote, fluorides are generally protoplasmic poisons, probably because of their capacity to modify the metabolism of cells by changing the permeability of the cell membrane and by inhibiting certain enzyme systems, unquote. That's Journal of the American Medical Association, September 18, 1943. Yet somehow big industry has convinced the world through brainwashing the American Dental Association and health authorities in every nation, as well as lying to politicians, that fluoride is safe. Quote, as a toxicologist involved in fluoride research for over 10 years, I was stunned by the Calgary Regional Health Authority's glib comments proclaiming water fluoridation safe. The 50 years of studies about fluoride safety do not exist. The ongoing intensive research on fluorides and fluoridation does not exist. Certainly none investigating safety, unquote. That's from Dr. P. Mullinex, Ph.D. It's the last article I got for you guys today. I don't want to leave you without the New World Order quote of the day. Quote, today America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there were an outside threat from beyond. Whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government, unquote. That is a quote from Dr. Henry Kissinger, Bilderberg Conference, Evian, France, 1991. And of course, I don't want to leave you without the proverb of the day, Proverbs 28:5, King James only. Evil men understand not judgment, but they that seek the Lord understand all things. That's all the articles, news, and quotes I got for you guys today. I'll leave you off with a song I brought you in on by Justified, titled Trust in Him.